President Trump is trying to renegotiate trade agreements with our nearest neighbors again. Why Canada's so upset today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Laura Rice. Much has been made over the political leanings of the Texas RGV, how things are looking for Senate candidates in the run-up to November. An iconic LGBT night spot is facing a shutdown threat. So what happened to the San Antonio mayor's promises to help keep it open? Plus, we'll introduce you to a Kerrville couple rebuilding once again after a second year of extreme flooding. And the best-selling author of a series of survival books recalls a harrowing true story set in the Texas Gulf. That and more today on the Texas Standard. From Toronto to Tascosa, Ontario to Odessa, Quebec to Quanah. It's the Texas Standard for Wednesday, July 22nd. I'm Laura Rice. Especially when it's topping 100 degrees in most parts of the state, Texas might seem awfully distant from the Great White North. But Canada is, of course, still one of our closest international neighbors and our second top trading partner. That means economic impacts are likely, as the Trump administration announced on the 1st of this month that it's not renewing the trade deal with Canada and Mexico. You may be thinking, wait, is that NAFTA? No, it's the so-called new NAFTA Trump's team negotiated in his first term. What Trump once called the, quote, largest, fairest, most balanced and modern trade agreement ever achieved, he's now apparently soured on. So not only is the deal out, but new tariffs on Canada are in. Raymond Robertson is an economist and expert in international trade, formerly with Texas A&M. Professor Robertson, welcome back.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Can you remind us what the terms of the deal with Canada and Mexico were before this expired?
Sure. So the trade agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico was known in the United States as the USMCA, which is a very broad-ranging agreement that extended what was formerly known as NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which had the ideal of eliminating all trade barriers between the three countries to promote trade and growth and prosperity all throughout North America.
So what happens when the clock runs out on a big trade deal like this?
Well, they decided to not extend the agreement and back past 2036, which is part of the concern. And in the meantime, we're going to be doing what's called annual reviews, which means every year we're going to have to come back and revisit. And the main implication of that is that it introduces a lot of insecurity and uncertainty about our trade relationships throughout North America, which means businesses are more hesitant to invest, and it's really a lot more difficult to make trade and investment decisions.
Well, and that's begun already. As I understand, there are some new tariffs on Canada. Specifically, what goods are being targeted by this round of fees?
That's a great question. So the president of the United States, President Trump, just announced 50% tariffs, which are supposed to go into effect on August 19th, targeted at Canada specifically to cover about 500 and maybe 550 different goods. And that includes a wide range of things. That includes hockey sticks and a lot of Canadian-specific goods, but also just a wide range of other consumer goods, which probably would be pushing up prices in the U.S. What's, I think, more interesting is what they don't apply to, and that's oil and potash, critical minerals, some automobile parts, which are things that the United States economy really does depend on from Canada.
Well, has Trump said what his goal is here politically and economically?
Yeah, so Trump had a lot of problems with the Canadian response to Trump's initial tariffs. So this is a classic example of a tit-for-tat trade war where Trump was upset about fentanyl coming in from Canada, which there wasn't a lot of anyway. But he imposed tariffs on Canada. Canada retaliated, and now Trump is saying that Canada has been discriminating against the United States with that retaliation, and so these tariffs are in response to those tariffs.
I mean, has that much changed in the economic relationship with U.S. and Canada since Trump led the negotiations to get this in place in his first term?
Actually, quite a bit, Laura, because what's happened is our exports to Canada have fallen precipitously, and some of the industries that have been hit hard are making a lot of noise. I mean, alcohol is one of the big ones because Canadians really enjoyed a lot of the Kentucky bourbon that we were selling and a lot of other goods that we would send to Canada. And that has really hit a lot of states in the United States pretty hard that relied on that Canadian trade.
So what have we heard from the Canadian side of the border about where we are with this deal and now these tariffs?
Well, Carney is the Prime Minister of Canada, Carney, right, has said that he is going to return to the negotiating table and negotiate hard over the next month because these new 50% tariffs don't go into effect until August 19th. And that gives both sides some time to cool down, take a deep breath, and try to assess the situation and try to find a productive solution.
So what are you watching as this develops?
Well, there's a lot of uncertainty, which is what makes it really interesting and fun to study as an economist, I will say. And we're really hoping that they're able to find a way to start promoting trade again, because we know that trade is a big component to increasing economic growth. And these tariffs, which are taxes on us, right, they're driving up our own prices here in the U.S., are hurting consumers at a time when prices are rising. So we're watching this on a day-to-day basis to make sure that there is some kind of resolution that doesn't affect consumers and doesn't drive up prices and can support growth.
Well, Canada is a huge trading partner with the U.S. And do you have concerns that situations like this hurt the long-term relationship between the U.S. and Canada, or is that still pretty safe?
Well, that's a great point, as a matter of fact. And the circles that I've been in through policy circles have said, especially on the Canadian side, that a lot of the damage is very long lasting. Like the Canadians have lost a lot of faith that they've had and their good friends to the south. They've been our best friend in the world. We've never had a better friend than Canada. But now the Canadians are highly suspicious and they're not ready to go back very quickly to that old relationship. So it's going to take many years to rebuild that kind of trust that we had.
Raymond Robertson is an economist and expert in international trade, formerly with Texas A&M. Professor Robertson, thanks again.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
As State Senator James Talarico and Attorney General Ken Paxton vie for a U.S. Senate seat, both are making the case for what Texas is and could be under their leadership. I'm David Brown. The two men paint largely different visions of the Lone Star State. Paxton is touting his bona fides on what many call culture war issues, like policy around transgender kids in sports. Meanwhile, Talarico's bringing his trademark liberal lens to everything from the economy to the Bible. Both candidates recently made campaign stops in the Rio Grande Valley, and Texas Monthly senior editor Allegra Hobbs was there. She joins us now to tell us more. Allegra, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Your story poses a question of who's Texas enough. Now, I have to say I've heard Paxton use this framing against Talarico, not so much the other way around. Why do you think that's the right question to be asking for this campaign?
Well, it's the question that Paxton is asking because I think what he is hoping and what other Republicans are hoping is that voters in the state of Texas will reject Talarico as not representative of their values, right? They're casting him as a far left radical. I think they're trying to appeal to more socially conservative voters who will be turned off by Talarico's past comments on transgender issues, on abortion, etc. And then also just taking aim at his supposed eating habits, his masculinity.
Right.
Talarico has not necessarily, at least in the event that I attended, it's not that he said explicitly, Ken Paxton is in Texas, the way I heard this at the Paxton event. But it seems like a political candidate is making an implicit argument through the way that they campaign. And the way Talarico has been campaigning, he kind of swept the border on this Frontera tour. He's been talking to people and meeting with them. The Edinburgh event was what his campaign called an act of service. He was helping to raise money for this local woman who is battling cancer. Mm-hmm. The whole tenor of his campaign has been, it's time to start flipping tables is kind of that's the catchphrase he's using, right? Which is a reference to
the Bible,
Jesus, the whole,
right.
Yeah.
Money changers.
The love your neighbor signs that you see at his campaign events. He is making an argument that this is what Christianity, and by extension, Texas values is or should be.
We should talk about the differences in tone and style. Have you come up with a shorthand for describing those differences?
Paxton is positioning himself as if you look at his campaign website, right, I will say it's quite sparse when it comes to policy. But what it does do is it makes an argument about his toughness, his ability to stand up to the radical left, his defense of President Trump's agenda. The tone at a Paxton campaign rally, it's oppositional, it's angry, it's this guy is trying to transform our state and we have to stop him and I'm the one to do it. And yeah, Talarico is trying to, through the tone of his campaign and the message of his campaign, create a big tent, right? He's trying to invite in Cornyn voters who now feel kind of homeless after the runoff. He's trying to invite would-be Republican voters or past Republican voters who perhaps can't stomach voting for Ken Paxton, who is dogged by controversy. The tone is in summation, love thy neighbor, and it is a distinct difference.
A lot of the counties along the border made headlines back in 2024 by swinging for Trump after being consistently Democratic. How do you think that context plays into this Senate race from what you can tell going through the RGV?
Oh, it very much it is present, certainly. And the counties in which these events took place were previously kind of reliably blue counties, and they swung for Trump in 2024. So I think the question is now, will they swing back? Or has this voting bloc been kind of permanently lost to the Republican Party? Certainly, there are voters along the border who are disillusioned. And then there are some voters who are socially conservative. And to them, the culture war, what Talarico calls the culture war, it's not that it's a distraction or less important than economic issues, but they care very much about what they see is safety issues for children, abortion, the way that they view their Christian faith. They kind of want to be certain that the integrity of that is preserved and not under threat. So, you could argue that they are mistaken that those things are under threat. But if they feel that they're under threat, those things matter to people. Especially when they're going into the ballot box. Sure, yeah.
Allegra Hobbs is senior editor at Texas Monthly, and it's a very fascinating read. We're going to have a link to her reporting at texasstandard.org. Allegra, thanks so much for talking with us on The Standard. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
There's more Texas Standard just ahead. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact. Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, offering degree programs and research focused on workforce development, student success, and health innovation across Texas. The University of Ambition, utsa.edu.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Compact, affordable, and simple to operate, electric scooters are increasingly prevalent. They're part of a rising trend toward micro-mobility. That's transportation using small, low-speed electric devices like e-bikes. But there are rising safety concerns, and some wonder how Texas cities can navigate the challenges. KERA's Emily DeMott reports from North Texas.
Stephen Hurst has lived in Little Elm since 2002. He said he's recently noticed kids in his neighborhood riding e-scooters at high speeds without following traffic laws or paying attention to their surroundings.
I've seen a lot of close calls, and it's kind of frightening. I usually call that a PIE situation. What I mean by that is a situation that we can all easily know that is predictable, P, inevitable, I, and eventual, E, that something tragic is going to happen.
Over 130 U.S. cities today, including Dallas and Plano, run rental scooter programs. Many more see personally owned e-scooters roam their streets. But as their numbers rise, so do reports of scooter-related injuries and even fatalities, including among kids. Dr. Anna Sussman is the Emergency Department Director at Medical City Children's Hospital in Dallas. She said she frequently sees kids come in with e-scooter injuries that range from broken bones to brain injuries. Sussman said she wants families to better understand the risks of, quote, small wheels and high speeds.
I don't want them to see what I get to see every day, but I want them to be aware that a child who wants to have fun, the risk a lot of times for these types of equipment do outweigh the benefit of that fun.
Young people are disproportionately represented in the tens of thousands of e-scooter-related injuries reported annually, over 40,000 in 2023. Texas law prohibits e-scooters on streets or highways with posted speed limits above 35 miles an hour, but any further regulations are up to local city ordinance. In North Texas, this means regulations vary pretty widely from city to city. Some cities, like Dallas and Plano, run rental scooter programs, which often come with their own sets of regulations. Others, like Little Elm, only allow minors to ride e-scooters on bike paths and sidewalks and require them to wear helmets. Still, Assistant Chief of Police Megan Lescalette says city police receive reports of unsafe riding several times a day.
Over the last several years, we haven't had any major injuries, but there have been several traffic accidents or traffic collisions involving kids.
But rather than strict enforcement, she says the department prefers to educate first. The department is currently developing an informational flyer outlining the city's micromobility regulations. It's designed to look like a pseudo-citation that kids must have signed by a parent or guardian.
The goal of this is going to be to create awareness and gain voluntary compliance before an injury. That's our ultimate goal, is so that no one gets seriously hurt.
Hexel Colorado founded the local advocacy group Dallas Urbanists. He's lived in the Metroplex without a car for over 4 years, primarily using micromobility devices to get around. He thinks rising e-scooter injuries aren't because kids are dangerous. The streets are.
It's really tough to use a scooter or really any micromobility out where there isn't any cycling infrastructure or walking infrastructure.
He said cities should focus on building physical and social infrastructure to make the streets safer for everyone, including elderly and disabled people. Colorado says one way to do this is by adding protected bike lanes with physical barriers, rather than just painted lines. While more micromobility infrastructure might inconvenience drivers, Colorado said it's a matter of keeping kids safe.
You can either choose to inconvenience and disappoint some people or protect and keep other people safe. I think convenience versus safety is the real trade-off that cities have to have the courage to take.
He said another step is fostering social environments where micromobility becomes normalized, like organizing bike-to-school events or investing in private retailers to build an industry around micromobility. I'm Emily DeMott in Dallas.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. Tropical Storm Bertha is expected to have a modest impact on Texas. It's been weakening as it makes its way toward Louisiana, where it will hit first. Many Texans are breathing a sigh of relief about that after a rain event last week caused a second year of deadly flooding in the Hill Country. Hurricane Harvey back in 2017 actually broke the record for the amount of rainfall from a single storm. It was, of course, devastating for areas around Houston, but Texas Standard commentator W.F. Strong also remembers it as a symbol of Texas resilience.
Someone on social media suggested that we should build a monument to two regular guys in a bass boat, and that idea has been seconded by tens of thousands. Even from where I live in deep South Texas, I saw dozens of trucks pulling boats headed north on Highway 77. Bass boats, swamp boats, pontoons, skiffs, and Navy SEAL-type Zodiacs. The call went out for help across the state, and Texans answered. They came from San Antonio and San Angelo, and Austin, Waco, Dallas, Fort Worth, Tyler, even I understand from the Panhandle and El Paso. From every nook and cranny of the state, they rolled toward the floods, spontaneous convoys racing to the coast. It was magnificent to see them. Texas flags bent by speed and proudly waving from their trucks and trailers. A genuine cavalry to the rescue. I talked to a man at a gas station near my house who was filling up his slightly lifted GMC. He was pulling a 15-foot bass boat with a trolling motor. I asked him if he was going to Houston. He said, "My brother and me thought we might head up that way. I mean, I got a truck and a boat. Might be a help to somebody. I know they'd do it for us if things were turned around." And they didn't just come from Texas. The Cajun Navy, as they are so beautifully named, came from Louisiana in large numbers, as did others from Arkansas and Oklahoma, and no doubt other states too. An old friend of mine, Matt Carr from Central Texas, answered the call. He said, driving into Houston in the storm was surreal. I-10, 290, and 610 had no cars on them. It was apocalyptic. Fields full of water, cows huddling on tiny islands above rising water. We felt all alone. We got there in a window of time before the world arrived again. He said the police were busy with calls and told the rescuers they were free to go where they pleased and help in any way they could. So they did. He said once the National Guard arrived, the process became more efficient. It felt like a Texas version of Dunkirk, he said. Less dangerous, but the same spirit. Matt rescued a 90-year-old woman named Hazel. She didn't have anyone in her life. She was alone. She didn't want to leave her house, but she was cold. Matt convinced her to go. He said, I took her to a bus so they could take her to a shelter. She was scared. So I knelt down next to her in the aisle of the bus, and we said a prayer together. And then I got back to work. Matt's was one of thousands of similar stories from that night. Here's another from my buddy Manny Fernandez, who is the Houston bureau chief for the New York Times. He was out riding along with many of these rescuers, impressed with their instinct for navigating what was now an urban bay. And it was dark, except for the helmet headlamps. Dangerous work. Manny asked many of these rescuers why they had come so far to take these risks. And he said that almost to a person they answered with these three words, "This is Texas." I'm W.F. Strong. These are stories from Texas. Some of them are indeed true.
You can find W.F. Strong's Stories from Texas at texasstandard.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Realtors, providing representation at every stage of the home ownership journey, helping clients understand their options and manage complex transaction details. Info at texasrealestate.com.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harrowing. Texas is going to see the hottest temperatures of the year today. Forecasters are expecting triple digits across most major cities, with the heat index soaring well above 100 degrees. Heat advisories are in effect across large parts of Texas. ERCOT, the state's power grid operator, expects the demand for energy to break a record. Meanwhile, Tropical Storm Bertha remains in the Gulf with winds up to 60 miles an hour. National Weather Service meteorologist Haley Bailey says Bertha will weaken after crossing over Louisiana before reaching the Texas coast late Thursday into Friday.
Forecast has it approaching the Texas coastline as a tropical storm. There's a lot of uncertainty still with the intensity.
Bertha is expected to produce only about an inch of rain when it reaches Texas. Governor Greg Abbott has issued an executive order to crack down on the practice of birth tourism. Our Andrew Schneider reports the move responds to the recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling upholding birthright citizenship despite efforts by President Trump to restrict it.
Abbott ordered state agencies to investigate schemes aimed at helping non-citizens travel to the United States illegally for the purposes of giving birth and securing U.S. citizenship for their children. Kate Lincoln Goldfinch is an Austin-based immigration attorney.
I think ultimately this is the behavior of a sore loser, someone like Greg Abbott, who's unhappy with the ruling of the Supreme Court, which upheld the 14th Amendment of the Constitution and birthright citizenship, and now the state is looking for other ways to enforce something that is entirely legal.
Lincoln Goldfinch worries the order could make hospitals wary of treating pregnant immigrants, endangering the lives of mothers and children alike. I'm Andrew Schneider, News 88.7.
The Dallas Arts District has a new executive director. KERA arts reporter Marquita Fornoff reports.
Ahava Silky Jones will lead the district, which is home to 19 cultural organizations. Previously, Silky Jones served as the vice provost at Dallas College's School of Creative Arts, Entertainment, and Design. The district's previous leader, Lily Weiss, retired in January. Dallas has landed in the top 3 arts districts in USA Today's national rankings for 6 years in a row. I'm Marquita Fornoff in Dallas.
And cases of cyclospora continue to grow in Texas as officials try to pinpoint the origin. There were 30 new cases reported in 1 week to the Texas Department of State Health Services, bringing the total number to 98. I'm Matt Harrowing in the Texas Newsroom.
You're listening to statewide news from public radio stations across Texas. This coverage is only possible because of support from listeners like you. You can help sustain and grow Texas news coverage by donating to your local public radio station today.
33 minutes past the hour Texas Standard Time. I'm Laura Rice. Businesses that can hold 300 people or more are required to have fire sprinklers in the city of San Antonio. Earlier this year, the city's government issued an ultimatum to a few places without them: install the sprinklers or shut down. Among these was the Bonham Exchange, an iconic LGBT nightclub just a block away from the Alamo. Installing the sprinklers would be an expensive endeavor for the Bonham, but a powerful ally pledged to help the club raise the cash: Mayor Gina Ortiz-Jones. That was months ago, though, and there are still no sprinklers in the Bonham Exchange. Megan Rodriguez covers City Hall for the San Antonio Express News. Megan, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what exactly did Mayor Ortiz-Jones promise to this nightclub's management?
Yes. So publicly, Mayor Gina Ortiz-Jones told reporters that she was going to tap donors and help fundraise for the Bonham Exchange. Privately, the Bonham Exchange's co-owner and manager, Joan Duckworth, and the club attorney, Javier Guerra, said that she put even stricter restrictions on herself, promising $550,000 in 45 days. That is the estimated cost of the sprinkler system and would have given them the funds by the end of March.
So has that happened?
Not yet, they say, or I shouldn't even say not yet. They really have no thoughts that the mayor is actually going to come forward with that funding. Mayor Jones, instead of bringing forward the funding that she had promised them, introduced Duckworth to Silver Venture CEO Bryant Ambling, whose company is really best known for overhauling the long-shuttered Pearl Brewery here in San Antonio, turned it into a mix of high-end apartments and stores and hotels and restaurants. And so Silver Ventures essentially laid out for the Bonham's co-owners, here are some proposals such as leasing portions of the business for other bar operators or turning part of it into an indoor market for rentable space for artisans. But the club rejected all of those, feeling like it just wouldn't be true to the Bonham Exchange, and it wasn't what they were anticipating when they were meeting up with Mayor Jones.
So have you heard from the mayor about this, about why she hasn't kind of fulfilled this promise, at least according to the club owners?
Yes. So Mayor Jones has been pretty quiet. She has not really conducted interviews with reporters following those February comments that she made publicly about fundraising, but she has released a few statements here and there. The most recent one, she has basically said through her chief of staff that she had kept her promise and that she arranged for those potential business solutions to be shown, and in the Bonham Exchange didn't take her up on them, and therefore she respects their decision, essentially, is what her stance is. And Duckworth and Guerra, the co-owner and attorney over at the Bonham, said that they also are uncertain, that they've never really received closure on what happened there.
Can you talk a little more about the Bonham Exchange's cultural relevance to San Antonio?
Yeah, so the Bonham Exchange, it is a huge LGBTQ plus nightclub. It is a 25,000 square foot club. It is operating out of a 19th century building that was once known as Turner Hall. The late San Antonio developer Hat Veltman actually opened the Bonham Exchange in 1981, and it's just been a popular LGBTQ plus gathering place ever since then. It's beloved within portions of the LGBTQ plus community and also has a solid number of straight and cis allies who turn out there regularly. And then as concerns have kind of mounted about the club's future, as they've struggled to obtain the funds for this fire suppression system, other members of the LGBTQ plus community have, tried to come and help out. So the Pride Bigger Than Texas parade and festival here in San Antonio, which is the main, Pride Festival in town, selected them as a beneficiary to try to contribute some of their proceeds to from this Pride Festival in an effort to help them out here.
So is the club headed toward a temporary shutdown, or what's the future look like?
That's a great question, actually. And I think everyone's kind of on the edge of their seats right now trying to figure out what the next steps are going to be. So basically, the club in February, kind of at the pressuring of Mayor Jones and with this promise of funding, agreed that they would go ahead and sign an agreement with the city, as did several other, clubs that did not have, as much collaboration with the mayor at the time, to basically reduce their occupancy while they tried to get these sprinklers installed. They had an August 1st deadline to get all of the first floor sprinklers in, then another 6 months after that to be able to get the second floor. They were going to have to just operate with 299 people or fewer on any given day. They would have been able to get a little bit more if they met that August 1st deadline. But now with this whole question mark of funding, they ended up getting a loan and are covering that. But it took them a few months to kind of secure that after they had to pivot from waiting for fundraising that they thought was going to come through. So they just secured that and are now waiting on the city to see, are they going to extend the August 1st deadline and allow them to continue allowing patrons in while they work on this, or will they have to close down temporarily? They estimate that it could take about 5 months or so to complete the sprinkler system on both the first and second floors.
Megan Rodriguez is a City Hall reporter for the San Antonio Express News. Megan, thanks again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. It was a sunny October day in 2022. Off the coast of Louisiana, 3 friends head into the Gulf for a day of fishing, hoping to catch some red snapper. But some 15 miles offshore, the 3 men suddenly find themselves clinging to a cooler, surrounded by rough seas, giant jellyfish, and circling sharks, as the Coast Guard races off to find them. It's a remarkable rescue story, and it's the subject of In Deep Water, the latest book from New York Times bestselling author Michael Tougias. Michael, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you, David.
What got you so interested in this story, and how did it come to your attention in the first place?
Well, I get pitched survival stories all the time because this is my 9th book of survival at sea and rescues. And what I look for is a lot of surprises, a long duration survival. This lasted 28 hours in the ocean, and tough decisions that need to be made. So that's what pulled me to In Deep Water.
What draws you to these sorts of stories? Is it just sort of the indomitable spirit, that kind of thing, or something else?
It's that, and also I ask myself, could I have made it? And when the answer is no, then I'm so curious, okay, how did they persevere, and what kind of decisions did they have to make to get, 100% correct?
Yeah.
And so those are the ones I tend to gravitate towards.
Well, this happened remarkably fast, and I know a lot of people will be asking themselves that question: would I have had the presence of mind? Their boats sank before they could even send a mayday. As you reconstructed what happened, how much did that surprise you about the circumstances of how they just found themselves floating there?
Yeah, they had made a couple mistakes that I outline in the book, but I've made the same mistakes myself because I'm always out on the ocean fishing. And when the boat went down, they only had time to grab life jackets and the cooler. And from there, it was, okay, how do we get through this? Because nobody knows where we are. Nobody knows the boat went down. And nobody's expecting us home at a certain time other than this evening. So there's no search going on when the boat sinks at about noon.
One of the promises that the 3 men made almost immediately was that they would stay together no matter what. That decision sort of ended up being critical, didn't it?
It did. It really helped them get through the night when the sharks are moving closer and they're being stung by jellyfish. But surprisingly, there's a break from that vow, and that affects the outcome in a surprising way.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to give away too much because this is one of those kinds of terrific reads for the summer. And it's not just a survival story. It's also, in a sense, a Coast Guard story. A lot to learn about how these rescue crews make decisions when they have so little to go on.
Absolutely. You had crews out of Corpus Christi. You had a boat skipper from Baytown, Texas. And, you know, in the beginning, their odds of finding anybody alive were just 1% because the search area was as big as Rhode Island.
You know, you mentioned that you'd written 9 books on survival stories. And as you look across these accounts, what seems to separate the people who make it home from those who don't?
If I had to pick one trait, it's take it hour by hour. Don't think how long you've got to make it because you'll get overwhelmed. So they're looking hour by hour, what can I do to improve my situation? Don't worry about the things I cannot control. Focus on the few that I can and then fight on for another hour. And pretty soon they've strung together, in this case, 28 hours of treading water and fighting off sharks.
Yeah. I found something rather fascinating about how, in a way, you sort of reconstruct a kind of internal narrative, the thoughts of these three. And I'm wondering, how did you get to that? Had you talked with these men, or were you imagining this, or how did you arrive at that narrative?
The 3 men who were recreational fishermen were just fantastic to work with. So I did many interviews with them, and they would actually give input on some of the sample chapters as well. So I was right inside their heads because they were telling me their thoughts.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned that you like to spend time on the open water yourself. Did you think you learned something, and perhaps something that readers will be picking up if they themselves find themselves out on the water somewhere, maybe something they should take to heart?
Absolutely. One of the big mistakes they made, and I realized, my God, I'm making the same mistake, is they didn't tell anybody where they were leaving from, where they were going, and when they were coming back. And I do that all the time. I just forget. And boy, I'm trying to follow that rule closely now.
What ultimately, when you think about these stories and the readers who are reading them, do you tend to think in terms of what can be learned as a kind of a lesson, or are you more thinking in terms of, because your writing is so engaging, it's they talk about page turners, and this is one of them, and I'm just curious if you think about this more as the kind of reading for a summer day, or if you're thinking more about the kind of person who is really intrigued by the sea and the stories of those first responders, that sort of thing.
I would say, first and foremost, my mantra is make it fast-paced. I just don't like books that are slow. I give up on them. So I always make it as fast as I can. And it's not until the first draft is completed that I begin to see some of the techniques they used mentally to get through the ordeal. And I go, boy, I could use some of those techniques when my luck turns bad in everyday life.
I was thinking that probably there's someone on Melrose or somewhere in L.A. thinking about how much of what a wonderful movie this would be. Have you already heard from Hollywood?
Yes, I'm working with an Academy Award-winning producer, Lily Zanuck, and we did the screenplay, and now she's going to be talking to different studios. So I'm in good hands, and we'll see where it goes. I've had one movie done called The Finest Hours. So I got lucky once. Maybe it'll happen again.
I don't suppose you want to consider the perilous waters of casting here. See anybody in the lead role or anything?
No, I haven't thought that far ahead. I did joke with the survivors, give me a role when it comes. Let me play one of your fathers. You never know with Hollywood. The Finest Hours was a little bit of luck, and we'll probably get a little bit of luck on In Deep Water as well.
Well, listeners, don't wait for the movie. Get out there so you can tell folks you read the book. Michael Tougias is the author of In Deep Water. He's the author of 9 books on these sorts of rescues, but this one is quite dramatic indeed, and I think something that a lot of folks who've spent time in the Gulf will definitely find quite relatable, even if they haven't experienced this sort of drama in real life. Michael, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Monthly, producer of Where the River Took Us, a podcast about the July 4th floods from survivor Aaron Parsley's perspective, through the voices of his family and others, telling the story of grief, healing, and survival. Available on all podcast platforms.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. After days of extreme flooding, the Texas Hill Country has begun shifting once again into recovery mode. Heavy rainfall last week caused flooding that killed 2 and left hundreds of homes and businesses damaged. For many, the experience meant reliving the trauma of last summer's catastrophic floods. The Texas Newsroom's Lucio Vasquez went to Kerr County, where one couple found that rebuilding means learning to live with a river they know will rise again.
The sound of honky-tonk music filled Howdy's Bar and Chill in Kerrville Thursday night. Behind the bar, owners Lorena Guillen and Bob Canales greeted customers by name. Outside, the wooden patio glistened after days of near-constant rain. Just beyond it, the Guadalupe River churned through Kerr County.
Feels a little bit of deja vu being here again today and seeing the river the same way it was last year.
That same river destroyed the RV park they owned just over a year ago. More than 130 people died in flooding across central Texas at that time. For Guillen and her husband, watching the Guadalupe rise again has reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Last year, in the early morning hours of July 4th, floodwaters tore through the region. The couple waded through rushing water, pounding on RV doors to wake sleeping campers. Guillen was helping people uphill when they spotted John and Julia Burgess trapped on a small island in the river with their 2 young boys. Last year, Bob Canales recounted the story to me. Across the raging river, he told me he shouted, "Throw me the baby."
And I understand why he didn't do it, because what if the baby didn't make it? Or what if I didn't get the baby? So instinctively, I stepped off the sidewalk and in an attempt to help him, but the water was too powerful.
The Burgess family disappeared into the current. Their bodies were found in the days that followed.
I remember seeing them standing by that tree you're looking at there with the lights on. And that was the last time I saw that fine young man with his family.
The couple helped save nearly 24 other campers. For the next few hours, they would helplessly watch as cabins broke loose from their foundations, as RVs were ripped from their parking spots, as cries for help echoed over the roar of the river. Months later, as they rebuilt their lives, Guillen was struggling.
It took a while, in my case, to realize that I needed some help. I didn't know that being, in a bad mood is some sort of depression and trauma. And of course, I was diagnosed with all that plus PTSD.
The flood also damaged their home. They've since moved about 40 minutes away. Guillen says she's grateful that things were different this year.
The big difference between last year and this one is we had no one staying on our property, sleeping overnight, so we didn't have to worry about people losing their lives like we did last year.
Now, instead of rebuilding the campground, the couple plans to create a riverfront space for day visitors. No more overnight guests. There's also new flood sirens on the property, donated by a private company.
A lot of our neighbors did evacuate it, and, it saved some lives.
After last year's flood, state lawmakers invested millions into new river gauges and flood sirens that now stretch across much of the Hill Country. Here's Governor Greg Abbott on Friday.
Because of everything that was learned and experienced in the flood last year, everybody in Texas has been far more prepared to deal with what has happened this year. There again is one reason why lives have been saved.
For locals in the Hill Country like Guillen and Canales, they know the Guadalupe will rise again. The difference they hope is that the community will be better prepared for the next flood. I'm Lucio Vasquez in Kerrville.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. It's time to check in with audience and engagement editor Wells Dunbar with the Talk of Texas. Wells, welcome.
Hi, Laura. Great to be with you. And yeah, sticking with the subject here a moment longer, the Talk of Texas, the query this week regarding flooding in Texas. And while we're looking to hear from listeners on anything related to that topic, we're also looking to make this a teachable moment of sorts and asking, what have you learned about flooding from living in Texas? Maybe it's a lesson about folks' own personal early warning systems or the type of items they might have in a bug out bag, or whether or what to hone in on when helping a neighbor or understanding just how quickly familiar roads and rivers can become dangerous. And we're encouraging folks to head to texasstandard.org/talk and record us a voice message we can share on air. That's what one listener did, so let's take a listen right now.
I'm Tonda, and I've lived in Texas a long time, which taught me to pay attention to weather. Do you know there's a heat advisory in North Texas where I live? Science taught me climate change is here now. Texas government is ignoring this fact. So thank you, Texas Standard, for your smart reporting.
Well, thank you, Tonda, for that smart comment there. Tonda talking about the political dimensions there. And that's part of the story here that many listeners are honing in on as well, especially just how these sorts of floods appear to be compounding year after year. One comment on our Facebook page here from Patrick Brown describing, in his words, how 500-year floods can happen every year. Similarly, a comment here from Christina Herrera talking about response, saying that the state focuses more on response than prevention. And so with regard to that topic of global warming, a story, I think maybe she's alluding, our listener Tonda was referring to that, a story we recently shared here on The Standard about how climate scientists have predicted greater flooding here in the state for decades, and it's just truly happening now. So lots to cover on this topic, and lots of folks reaching out. But again, we'd love to hear their specific stories and what they have learned about flooding from living in such a flood-prone part of the nation. So go to texasstandard.org/talk and record us a voicemail message. Easy as pie to do there on your cell phone. Just pull it out, press that record button, and leave us a voicemail message. And referring or calling back there to what we were talking about these how increasing temperatures have the capacity to hold more water, which can lead to these bigger floods. Huge swath of the state, from portions of the Panhandle down south and throughout the rest of Texas, under an extreme heat warning and heat advisory today. So definitely something to watch out for if you're out there. It's going to be a real hot one. And we may be getting a little bit of a respite here with the weather. Another story we've been tracking here, Tropical Storm Bertha, apparently weakening significantly before it reaches Texas, which is a good thing in terms of these communities that have been hit by flooding so far, Laura.
Definitely, Wells. You know, I relate a lot to what Tonda said about just watching the weather. It's a thing that you got to do in Texas. You know, no matter what it is, I've got the app on my phone, pull up the radar if it looks a little sketchy, and just check out what's going on. Another thing I learned was making sure that those emergency alerts on my phone, no matter how annoying, right? I changed the settings because I think, you know, like some of us, it's very annoying when they go off at 2 a.m. But then, what happened last year, a reminder of just how important that is.
And I think you can tailor them. You can turn some alerts off, but keep maybe the weather alerts on. So, yeah, something to definitely keep an eye on there.
Support for Texas Standard comes from University Extension at UT Austin, offering open enrollment to a wide variety of UT's undergraduate credit courses that can be taken by anyone from anywhere. Learn more at extension.utexas.edu. Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington Family, and St. David's Foundation. Additionally, Texas Mutual Insurance Company is a founding sponsor of Texas Standard.